Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump on his way to Scotland. He answers reporter questions on Hamas and trade deals before departure. Israel and the United States recall their delegations from Gaza ceasefire talks. What does it signal? We talked to a Middle East affairs analyst. The U.S. criticizes French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state. The response from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Deportation flights from a detention facility in Florida known as Alligator Alcatraz are starting. What Governor Ron DeSantis says about the effort and the goals of the operation. Russia follows the Chinese Communist regime in persecuting its citizens for their beliefs. Russia just jailed a Falun Gong practitioner, and it's not the first time.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. President Trump is headed to Scotland, where he's set to talk trade with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Just before takeoff, the president answered questions from reporters weighing in on the war in Gaza and ongoing trade talks with U.S. allies.
Yeah, Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad. Are you done? And it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out, so now we're down to the final hostages. And they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
The president also took a question on Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. He said he hasn't thought about giving a pardon or a commutation to Maxwell. Here's what Trump said about trade negotiations with the European Union and the trade deal with the UK.
I would say that we have a 50-50 chance, maybe less than that, but a 50-50 chance of making a deal with the EU. And it'll be a deal where they have to buy down their tariffs, because they're right now at 30%. And they'll have to buy them down, maybe, or they could leave them the way they are. But they want to make a deal very badly. We want to talk about certain aspects, which is going to be good for both countries. More fine-tuning. And also, we're going to do a little celebrating together because, you know, we got along very well. UK's been trying to make a deal with us for like 12 years and haven't been able to do it. We got it done.
Trump said the U.S. will have most trade deals finished by the August 1st deadline, but said negotiations with Canada haven't been going well. He suggested that Canada might have to simply pay U.S. tariffs without successful negotiation. Trump will meet UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer during his 5-day private visit to Scotland. Today, the U.S. Central Command announces that it killed a senior ISIS leader in Syria. The military said it conducted a raid earlier this morning, killing Dia Zaba Musli al-Hardini. They also killed the leader's 2 adult sons, who are also affiliated with ISIS. In a post on X, the U.S. Central Command said, quote, "These ISIS individuals posed a threat to U.S. and coalition forces, as well as the new Syrian government. The military command promises to continue to relentlessly pursue ISIS terrorists wherever they are." And the United States is recalling the negotiation team working on talks to end the war in Gaza. A State Department spokesperson said yesterday that recent responses from Hamas show a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also weighed in.
While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home and try to create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza.
If Hamas interprets our willingness to reach a deal as weakness, as an opportunity to dictate terms that would endanger the state of Israel, it is making a grave mistake.
Netanyahu also said Israel and U.S. are considering other options to bring the hostages home. and end the rule of Hamas in the territory. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff said Hamas was to blame for the impasse. Netanyahu said Witkoff got it right and that Hamas was the obstacle to a deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio criticized France's plan to recognize Palestine as a state. In a post on X, he called it a slap in the face to the victims of October 7th. Rubio condemned the move as reckless, saying it fuels Hamas propaganda and pushes peace further out of reach. French President Emmanuel Macron announced the decision yesterday, sparking swift backlash from Israeli leaders. Here's more.
With the move, France would become the first major Western country to recognize a Palestinian state, potentially fueling a movement so far dominated by smaller nations generally more critical of Israel. Israel maintains that recognizing a Palestinian state now would be equivalent to rewarding Hamas. Israeli officials have spent months lobbying Paris to prevent what some have called a nuclear bomb for bilateral ties, and news of Macron's decision on Thursday sparked anger in Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the move, quote, rewards terror and risks creating another Iranian proxy. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it played into Hamas's hands and was a, quote, slap in the face to the victims of October 7th. Macron had been leading towards recognizing a Palestinian state for months as part of a bid to keep the idea of a two-state solution alive, despite pressure not to do so. Now the announcement comes ahead of a UN ministerial meeting on the subject next week. The timing is aimed to give the French team a framework to work with other countries that are also considering recognizing a Palestinian state or have misgivings over doing so.
Meanwhile, other European allies are weighing in on recognition of Palestine as a state. A British cabinet minister said the UK supports the eventual recognition of a Palestinian state, but he said the immediate priority should be to end the suffering in Gaza and ensure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Earlier, British governments have stated they would recognize a Palestinian state at the right time. However, they never set a timetable or detailed the conditions needed for this to happen. Italy's foreign minister said the recognition of a Palestinian state must concur, or rather occur along with the recognition of Israel by the new entity. He said a Palestinian state that does not recognize Israel means the problem won't be resolved. A government spokesperson from Germany said today the country won't recognize a Palestinian state in the short term. He said the priority now is to make long overdue progress towards a two-state solution. Joining us now to discuss the latest on the Hamas-Israel ceasefire talks and the food situation in Gaza is David Wormser, Senior Analyst, Center for Security Policy, and former Senior Advisor to U.S. Vice President Cheney. Good afternoon, David. Always great to talk to you. To start off, the U.S. and Israel recalled their delegations from Gaza ceasefire talks. What does that mean? What is the signal?
Well, it could mean one of two things. I mean, the first is the more obvious, is they've given up. They don't think that Hamas is serious and that they're not going to sign a deal, and there's really no diplomatic track anymore to get it done. And that's verbally what we heard from the president. The second option is, and I think it's more unlikely, but it's still out there, is that this is the Israelis are signaling with the United States both playing real hardball with Hamas and essentially saying, fine, if you don't want to make a deal, we can escalate. We can go, the United States and Israel can, or as President Trump said, Israel can go all the way. And maybe the threat of that, or the beginning of that, or the course of that, that could lead Hamas to finally realize that the game is up and they have to give up. It could mean one of those two things. I think though it's the former.
Okay, what are your thoughts on the chances? Which way are you leaning in terms of peace talks restarting again?
Yeah, I think that at this point Hamas has gone as far as it's going to go in terms of the diplomatic route. I think that they are going to try to string along the West, Israel, and the United States as much as they can, but they really can't, in their mind, go any further, partly because they answer to people from abroad who have a vested interest in keeping the conflict going, but second of all, because they really don't have any options left in terms of giving up and surviving. The Israelis and the United States have made it very clear that the end of this process is their removal from power, and they don't want to give up power. So I think those are that really leads to the point where Hamas has no more. It's the end of the road here, essentially, for them.
So then why not agree to a deal that benefits itself and it will be beneficial for other parties as well? Why doesn't Hamas just do that?
Well, I mean, objectively, they're at the end of the road, but they, by the declaration by the French, they feel that maybe they're winning the public affair campaign. So they're not playing for Gaza. They're playing for the larger issue of destroying Israel and destabilizing the West and embarrassing the U.S. government. So for them, they're quite encouraged by this constant focus on what's going on the ground in Gaza with, quote, starvation and so forth as well. So they're encouraged that on the larger question of their role in Palestinian society, and even more, their role in the radical Islamist camp, will be secured by giving up Gaza. So Gaza is only the means for them. It's not the ends.
So Steve Witkoff, the U.S. envoy, says, quote, "We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home." What does that mean? What are the alternative options?
Well, there could be, again, three. First is the one that we've already mentioned, which is that the Israelis escalate and commence to taking over the remainder of Gaza, during which maybe Hamas, realizing that Israel's serious, might give in. The second thing is what obviously commandos. Israel's done that. It's freed some hostages. It's obviously very famous for having done that in Entebbe and other crises. It could mean that. The third way is simply if Israel occupies, some of the operatives who are holding these hostages may decide to save themselves. It's not an agreement with Hamas. It may be an agreement with local Palestinians that want to save themselves from the consequences of this and their neighborhoods, since the Israelis would go in. Or the fourth option, I said three, but there is a fourth, is that there are Palestinian tribes and families, mafias essentially too, that could intervene and save the day for both sides, and in the process establish themselves as the alternative to Hamas. So there are those options on the table.
So Israel's campaign, I mean, there's a lot of criticism against it. There's also a lot of support for it, right? What are the risks and rewards, benefits as well, in Israel continuing a military campaign in Gaza?
Well, the risks both for not continuing and doing what they're doing now, sort of a slow grind versus a more escalated campaign. I think what you see, of course, is the risk, first of all, is the killing of the hostages. At any moment when Hamas feels that it might be losing, it wants to split Israeli society as well as simply hurt Israel. So they could kill the hostages. The second thing are the images that you see, starving kids and so forth. While one can go into why those images are even there, many of which are fake, by the way, but some might be real because there might be pockets of hunger. There's no vast starvation. And one can go into the cause. The cause is really that Hamas and the UN are sitting on top of vast deposits of food that the Israelis have left through. But because Hamas uses the food for money and for survival, and they insist on a distribution structure, they want to destroy the American-based distribution structure. And as a result, they're pretending, or they're deliberately enforcing a hunger. Whatever the issue is there, those images do not help Israel. They're a tremendous asset for Hamas and the Palestinian side in undermining Israeli support in Europe. And it's already led to the French declaration, or intention to declare a state, which then loops back and encourages them to keep going.
So you mentioned the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and I think it's important to reiterate, and maybe we could get your comments on, when we're talking about whether there's enough food for the people there, the situation, when we're looking at the relevant reports, those images that you mentioned, what should we consider, concerning the reliability of this information, especially given the fog of war, right? The risk of misinformation, that's there, maybe potentially also information coming from sources that might be compromised. So let's get your comments on that.
Well, indeed. I mean, almost anybody operating on the Hamas side, even hospitals and NGOs, are there because Hamas sees them as useful. Hamas has shown it really doesn't care that much about the Palestinians themselves. They hide behind them while they're in their tunnels, and the Palestinians are above ground in a war. So they actually are quite encouraged by the propaganda utility of having killed dead Palestinians and hungry Palestinians. The second thing is they need the food structure in their control because the food is donated for free. They resell it at a tremendous price. So that is the money that Hamas needs to pay its operatives, pay off tribes, and stay in power. And as a result, it can't give up the food distribution structure. But here come the Americans and the Israelis, and they've set up a secure food distribution structure that does get the food for free to the Palestinians and undercuts them. So they really have no choice here but to try to destroy that free food structure. And the way they're doing it is saying, oh, Israel is starving Gaza. All this food is not getting in. And the Americans may love their one or two little places of distribution, but there's not enough food in here. Look, all the Palestinians are starving. The only problem with that is we see the border and we see what Israel's let in and what the UN and Hamas have under their control. And right now, there's almost 1,000 trucks sitting under their control in Gaza, not being distributed.
Your thoughts on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's handling of the situation?
Well, they've been quite professional. We've had, again, Hamas Health Ministry talks about 10, 20, 30 people being shot at their distribution centers. All these things turned out not to be true, as so much of what the Hamas Health Ministry does say, whether it's the Al Ahli hospital at the beginning of the war being bombed when it wasn't. And there's really been almost nobody killed by the American company, GHF, under Reverend Moore, or the Israelis who are providing protection for it. And it's been an effective structure. The Palestinians who show up are quite happy about it. They've distributed close to 50 million meals in the last month and a half to two. So it's working. And I would just go with it. Whether they're choosing the right Palestinian tribes or clans, or some would call them mafias, to work with, it's a little bit distasteful, but they are working with some, and one can criticize that, but it's working.
Well, all right, David, like I said in the beginning, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, deportation flights from a detention facility in Florida known as Alligator Alcatraz are starting. What Governor Ron DeSantis says about the effort and the goals of the operation. Stay tuned.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritan green vegetable omega-3. Greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
The federal government is starting deportation flights from a detention facility in Florida known as Alligator Alcatraz. Governor Ron DeSantis commented on the operation while speaking in the Florida Everglades this morning.
You know, this was never intended to be something where people are just held and we just kind of twiddle our thumbs. The whole purpose is to make this be a place that can facilitate increased frequency and numbers of deportations of illegal aliens. And that is the goal.
Homeland Security is operating the deportation flights, so far transferring about 100 detainees to other countries. Alligator Alcatraz is located in the Everglades on the site of the Dade Transition Airport. During the press conference this morning, DeSantis praised how the commercial airplanes can land the facility and quickly deport illegal immigrants to other countries. The center's name alludes to the number of alligators in the area and the former maximum security Alcatraz prison in San Francisco. The facility was built in 8 days over 10 square miles, which equals to over 170 football fields. It features more than 200 security cameras, over 5 miles of barbed wire, and 400 security personnel. The Justice Department filed a lawsuit against New York City yesterday to challenge its so-called sanctuary city laws. The complaint filed in the Eastern District of New York says New York's sanctuary policies have obstructed the federal government from enforcing its immigration laws. It accuses the city of allowing dangerous criminals to remain on the streets committing serious crimes. This lawsuit is one in a long line of complaints the department has filed, including complaints against the state of New York and the city of Rochester as part of an effort to invalidate the sanctuary policies. A spokesperson for Mayor Adams said the mayor supports the essence of the city's sanctuary policies, but he has urged the city council to revisit them so the city can better cooperate with the federal government in dealing with violent criminals. The spokesperson added that so far the council has refused. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to pause a lower court ruling. It required the administration to restore hundreds of millions of dollars in research grants canceled earlier this year. Last month, a district judge in Massachusetts ruled that the National Institutes of Health violated federal rules. This was after it canceled nearly $800 million in research grants. They were focused on gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. A federal appeals court declined to put that decision on hold. Now the administration is seeking an emergency appeal from the Supreme Court. The administration argues the grants don't align with its policies or meaningfully advance public health. Healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente will no longer provide surgeries to treat minors with gender dysphoria. In its decision, Kaiser cited efforts by the Trump administration to prohibit irreversible gender procedures for children. Kaiser Permanente is one of the nation's largest nonprofit health plans. The company serves more than 12 million members across 8 states. In January, President Trump issued an executive order titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. According to the order, the federal government, quote, will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another. Earlier this month, the Department of Justice sent 20 subpoenas to doctors and clinics that perform transgender medical procedures on children. Kaiser said it will continue to offer other treatments, such as hormone therapies. Teenagers are getting new safety features while on social media. Meta said teens will have options to block accounts with one tap. And when chatting with strangers, they'll have more information about the person's accounts. NTD's David Lan reports.
Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, says it's launching new safety features to protect the younger generation. On Wednesday, Meta said that teen accounts will give teenagers more info about who they are direct messaging. This would help point out scammers in the DM chats. Teens will see new options to view safety tips and block an account. They will also see the month and date that an account was created. Older accounts usually mean more trust, as perpetrators make new accounts when their old ones get blocked.
I think that would help a lot. I think that would be great. All my children, they're all adults. The youngest one is in her 20s. But if they were younger, I think the sexual predators would be the red flag. I mean, that would be my main concern.
More teens seem to be using the new block and report feature in the DMs. Meta stated in June alone, they blocked accounts 1 million times and reported another 1 million after seeing a safety notice. And that 1 in 10 teenagers used the location notice to check where the people they're chatting with are located and if it matches with what they're claiming. Meta said this year their teams removed almost 135,000 Instagram accounts for leaving sexualized comments or requesting sexual images from accounts featuring children under 13. They also removed 500,000 Facebook and Instagram accounts linked to those accounts. These steps come after parents and lawmakers have advocated for safer interactions for youths while online or using social media. David Lam, NTD News, California.
An IT fraud scheme that generated millions of dollars in revenue for the North Korean regime. The Justice Department is announcing that an Arizona woman deceived top U.S. companies into hiring remote North Korean workers.
Christina Chapman of Arizona was sentenced to 102 months of imprisonment for conspiring with North Koreans to infiltrate U.S. companies, including Fortune 500 companies, with the goal of creating revenue to send to North Korea for their munitions development. So North Korea's munition department has trained and deployed more than 3,000 workers in information technology or IT skills so that they can then commit fraud on companies in the United States to generate revenue for the North Korean regime.
The Justice Department explains how the fraud was carried out. North Korea used stolen or fraudulent identities of 68 U.S. individuals to set up fake online personas. Then the communist regime got remote work positions with 309 companies, including Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. The companies were deceived into believing the workers were in the U.S. when they were in fact in North Korea. Many listed their home addresses where they would receive checks at Christina Chapman's house in Arizona. The Justice Department says the fraud shows that the threat of North Korea is no longer afar, and that it's already being penetrated on U.S. soil with the goal of crippling the U.S. The Justice Department sends its warning corporate America.
This is a code red. Your tech sectors are being infiltrated by North Korea. And when big companies are lax and they're not doing their due diligence, they are putting America's security at risk. And it's time for the big corporations to step up for employee verification, which went through a change as a result of COVID, where there is this lax kind of overseeing of who employees are. It's time for businesses to verify their workers, monitor their conduct, create a zero trust structure, and they've got to do this before the security of our country is compromised. That means do a real interview. Get them on camera. look and see if the person whose picture you have is the person that you're talking to.
A first-of-its-kind California law got shut down by a federal appeals court yesterday. A federal appeals court has ruled California can't require background checks for the purchase of ammunition. The court said the first-of-its-kind law is unconstitutional and that it violates the Second Amendment rights to bear arms. The ruling confirms a lower court's permanent injunction that blocked the state from enforcing the law. Circuit Judge Sandra Ikuta said the law was inconsistent with traditional firearm regulation approved by the Supreme Court. California Governor Gavin Newsom said the ruling was a slap in the face to efforts by California officials to enact firearm restrictions to curb gun violence. Former Representative George Santos is expected to report to federal prison today to begin serving his sentence of more than 7 years for fraud and identity theft. 37-year-old Santos was expelled from Congress after a brief and scandal-plagued tenure. Prosecutors had recommended an 87-month sentence, saying the top end of Santos' guideline sentence range was appropriate to reflect the seriousness of his unparalleled crimes. Santos pleaded guilty to 2 of the 23 criminal counts he faced for inflating fundraising numbers and faking donor names to qualify for financial support from the Republican Party during the 2022 election cycle. That's when the political newcomer was elected to represent a slice of New York City and its eastern suburbs. The U.S. and Mexico have reached a landmark agreement to tackle decades-old environmental crisis, and that is the flow of Mexican sewage into U.S. waters. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports.
The U.S. and Mexico have reached an agreement to stop the daily discharge of up to 50 million gallons of sewage-contaminated water from the Tijuana River into the Pacific Ocean near San Diego. For years, the beach in Imperial Beach, a San Diego suburb, has been closed due to contamination, with keep out of water signs becoming a fixture. The pollution has hurt both tourism and public health. On Wednesday, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Mexico's Environment Minister Alicia Bárcena signed a Memorandum of Understanding in Mexico City. Under the deal, Mexico will fast-track more than $90 million in upgrades to the Tijuana sewage system. In return, the U.S. will release funds to finish expanding a sewage treatment plant located on the U.S. side of the border. That plant treats wastewater piped in from Mexico. The expansion is expected to be completed by the end of August. Zeldin called the agreement a huge win for millions of Americans and Mexicans.
I smelled what a lot of residents in the community live through and have to deal with. I saw the degradation of the Tijuana River Valley. I heard about the beaches that were closed. I met with the Navy SEALs who have had their training impacted.
And while the New Deal targets water contamination, a recent study warns the danger may also be in the air, as toxic particles from the Tijuana River are now believed to travel miles inland, raising fresh health concerns. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, Russia follows the Chinese Communist Party's lead and jails people for their belief. The country arrested a practitioner of Falun Gong, and it's not the first time. Find out more after the break.
15-year-old son, Ethan, and I had a fun and relaxing morning. We returned home, and Ethan walked to his best friend's house an hour later. I heard the ambulance scream by the street, carrying my beautiful boy. Ethan was shot in the head in his best friend's house with an unsecured gun. He had zero chance of survival. The father, the gun owner, he stored his 3 guns and bullets in a shoebox.
How do you feel?
That has to be the most horrific experience that a human could ever have.
David, would you give any advice?
First thing you do is not keep your ammunition with your weapons, and that your weapons need to be locked at all times.
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020.
We were adopted in 2019.
And we were adopted in 2021.
We had a house, and it sounds crazy, but it wasn't a home. The one thing that Jake and Emma brought is it became a home.
When I met Dakota, he had just turned 14.
You weren't there for the first this and the first that. I missed the first words, but we got a lot of other firsts.
Watching her say, oh my God, I cannot believe I got my license. And she's like, I passed. And I'm like, girl.
See them grow. It is.
They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
You and you. Kids in the middle.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete, but it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Russia has followed the Chinese Communist Party's lead and is persecuting its citizens who practice Falun Dafa, a mind-body cultivation practice also known as Falun Gong. Those who practice have faced over 2.5 decades of persecution in China, including the forcible harvesting of their organs. Joining us now to discuss further is Levi Brody, Executive Director of Falun Dafa Information Center. Levi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us to talk about this. So what are your first thoughts on the persecution in Russia? How did it begin?
Well, the first thought, I think, is it's a shame that Beijing's influence is reaching into Russia and other countries, because clearly that's what's at play here. That's the only reason Russia or any other country outside of China would take these kind of measures to Falun Gong people, people who peacefully meditate.
How is the severity in Russia of this persecution, what it's doing there compared to China?
Well, it's nothing compared to China, really. I mean, Russia, like over 100 countries around the world, have people who practice Falun Gong and do so freely and peacefully. But as Russia, I guess, has tried to curry favor more and more with Beijing, we have seen in recent years them taking some acts that are unprecedented outside of China, trying to take organizations that are Falun Gong organizations and try and deem them illegal, ransacking people's homes, these kinds of things. So these are the kinds of activities we were starting to see in Russia a few years ago, and they've all obviously escalated dramatically with sentencing people to actually prison for being a Falun Gong practitioner.
So you're saying that Russia wants to improve its favor with the Chinese Communist Party. So it begs the question, at least in my mind, maybe you can comment, is this more symbolic than actually Russia wanting to do this itself?
Well, the indication of that is, and of course I'm not in the back rooms of government folks in Russia, but the indications are that's the pattern, and that is the pattern generally when dealing with Beijing. One way to curry favor with Beijing is to go after the dissidents of China, the voices that China wants, the communist regime wants to silence, and Falun Gong is at the very top of that list. And, again, initially, some of the things we saw in Russia, they were correlated to, for example, visits from the CCP leader, Xi Jinping. Just before he'd come into Russia, stuff would happen against the Falun Gong. So it does seem very tied to trying to curry favor with Beijing.
Would you characterize as the recent actions that Russia is doing more towards, isolated or widespread or somewhere in between?
Well, I think it's somewhere in between. I mean, initially, you know, going back to about 2011, they tried to ban the main book, Zhuang Falun, of Falun Gong, but there wasn't really any more activity beyond that for several years. And then they started again ransacking homes, trying to delegitimize, you know, volunteer organizations that help people, you know, organize themselves to meditate in the parks, something as simple as meditating in the parks. And so they're now starting to go after Falun Gong associations, and now, of course, ransacking homes, taking people to detention centers, and throwing people into prison. And in the sentence that just happened, I mean, that was, I think, the third or fourth sentencing. We saw two other sentences, one earlier this year and one at the end of last year. So they are now starting to actually put people into prison for practicing Falun Gong.
So we cover the news every day, and you're saying this has dated back a while. So why is it back in the spotlight now? Is there an escalation, would you say?
I think there is. I mean, specifically, a woman was sentenced to 4 years in prison just a few days ago in Russia. And I think that's this week why it's in the headlines. But again, there was a sentence earlier this year. And one at the end of last year. And I think a total of 8 practitioners around the country in Russia have been detained, again, just for being practitioners of Falun Gong. I think another reason it's also in the news is our government is condemning it. The State Department, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, both of them came out with statements in the last, I think, 36 hours, condemning this and telling Russia not to do this kind of thing.
Is there any consequences that Russia may face for this?
Well, I mean, they're already facing condemnation, and that is one thing that's going on. I mean, some of the voices in Washington, D.C. are saying that Russia should be redesignated as a country of particular concern. And so I think these types of things are already in play and are very appropriate given what Russia is trying to do to people who are just trying to meditate and peacefully practice Falun Gong in Russia.
So you said earlier that it's somewhere in between isolated and widespread, the recent actions in Russia. Where would you say the trajectory is going?
Well, I think it depends on two things. One, just how much favor Russia wants to curry with Beijing, and perhaps as important or more important is what is the international response? Because again, this is not just about Falun Gong. I think when you have to look at the broader issue of what is the ability of Beijing to dictate their repressive tactics onto other countries and have those countries, you know, take those tactics. I mean, I think we really have to look at what is the strategy here, what is the playbook, and the United States, other democracies around the world need to recognize that this is something very dangerous, and that we all need to stand up and put pressure on Russia to not do this to Falun Gong, but again, more broadly, to not have any country say, I want to curry favor for Beijing, and therefore I'm going to violate my own laws and go against my own people just to do that. I think this is a bigger issue, and we all need to take that seriously.
Right, and on the point of standing up, what are practitioners doing in Russia in light of this?
Well, I don't have a lot of contact with the folks in Russia. I mean, obviously, there's a great amount of concern. I'm not sure there's something they should be doing anything differently because, again, they weren't doing anything wrong. This is a peaceful meditation practice. They're organizing themselves to meditate in the parks, study the religious teachings of Falun Gong. And, you know, I would hope that they were going to continue to do that and do that without being harassed by the Russian government. Now the Russian government sees that there's an international backlash to this kind of behavior.
I'm wondering if there's a connection because in recent times, we've reported on how the CCP is engaging in transnational repression. And now we're hearing these stories coming out of Russia. Is there a connection there?
I think there is, and I think it's interesting to see the way it plays out. In the case of Russia, what appears to be going on is the Russian government or elements within the Russian government seem to want to curry favor with Beijing to directly go after their own people. Here in the United States, of course, that's not going to fly, but you still see the same objective, which is Beijing wanting to carry out repression in other countries. They just use it very differently. And so here in the United States, you're seeing transnational repression takes the form of, you know, manipulation of perhaps some of our media or social media, perhaps baiting some of our government agencies. So the end objectives are still at play. in various countries, but the way they're going about doing it appears to be quite different.
How would you characterize the level of the CCP's transnational repression in the U.S.? Severe, not severe?
Extremely severe. In fact, I think when the dust settles on all this, we're going to be shocked by the amount of infiltration, manipulation, influence that the CCP is wielding in this country, and in some cases doing that through American institutions, whether they're media institutions or other institutions. We're going to be absolutely shocked by how much they have been able to get away with. And hopefully, a lot of voices are now standing up. There are acts in Congress, there are elements within our executive branch that are looking at this. I think the FBI says that, as of a couple of years ago, they were opening up a new case every 10 hours. So this is a huge problem, and it's hard to overstate it.
So lastly, what can people do to help? Because we've heard people say that if the CCP can do what it's doing now to this group of people, it can do this for any group of people. So what can people do to prevent this?
I think the best thing to do is, first of all, recognize transnational repression in all of its forms. And so when there's a group of people like Falun Gong being targeted here in the United States or other countries because of the economic clout, the political clout of Beijing, everybody needs to rally around that. And we have to stop that in its tracks, because again, it's not going to stop with Falun Gong. If the CCP can get away with this against the Falun Gong group, they're going to go after other groups. And so this really is, in many cases, for the United States and other countries, this is a national issue of our sovereignty and national security.
Well, okay, Levi, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Two of America's biggest financial institutions are under scrutiny for their roles in the initial public offering of Chinese battery giant CATL. Lawmakers subpoenaed the bank's CEO, saying they've been stonewalled trying to get answers. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
CEOs of JP Morgan and Bank of America are under scrutiny for their role backing a Chinese military tech giant. The institutions worked on the listing of Contemporary Imperex Technology, or CATL, a leading battery manufacturer which supplies to EV makers like Tesla. The House Select Committee on the CCP said this company directly poses U.S. investor and national security risks because it's a sector explicitly targeted by China's state-driven military-civil fusion policy. The Department of Defense added cattle to its list of Chinese military companies operating in the United States. Lawmakers previously urged JP Morgan and Bank of America to pull out of their roles in underwriting it and ask the CEOs questions about their involvement, only to be stonewalled, according to Chairman John Molinar. The chairman wrote, "Wall Street shouldn't be underwriting Chinese military companies, and the American people deserve transparency." Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Responding to the subpoenas, a Bank of America spokesperson said they have had constructive engagement with the committee and will continue to engage. JP Morgan declined to comment, but in May defended their involvement with CATL, saying JP Morgan did a lot of due diligence around the issues raised. Meanwhile, China's military may be headed for major changes. The country's top military leadership recently issued new regulations targeting officials involved in political work. Many of these officials are closely tied to Chinese leader Xi Jinping's inner circle. To break down Beijing's latest move and what it means for U.S. policy on China, NTD's Flora Hua spoke with two China analysts. Here's a closer look.
China's military newspaper published a new regulation on Monday, calling on political personnel to strictly obey the regime's discipline. It also announced plans to eradicate poisonous influences, a phrase the Chinese Communist Party often uses to signal large-scale internal purges. But this time, the focus is on a specific group within China's military political apparatus.
This new regulation is essentially a major political purge targeting Mao Hua and, by extension, Xi Jinping's control over the military's political apparatus.
Since last year, many officials seen as Xi's loyalists have been sacked or vanished from public view. Miao Hua, a senior Chinese military leader promoted by Xi, helped install many of Xi's loyalists within China's forces. He himself was purged late last year. Besides Miao, He Weidong, the Chinese military's third-in-command and Xi's choice to lead a potential Taiwan invasion, has disappeared from public view for 4 months. Both men were deeply involved in political affairs. Veteran China analyst Tang Jingyuan says this new regulation targets those promoted by the two, part of what's known as Xi's faction.
The scale of the purge could be vast, potentially involving a large number of senior officers in the Chinese military. It could trigger major upheaval within the military itself and may even have a significant impact on the broader political landscape of the Chinese Communist Party.
Joshua Phillip, senior investigative reporter from our sister media outlet, The Epoch Times, echoed Tang's view.
The Chinese military, a rival faction, looks like it purged all the main loyalists of Xi Jinping. The new regulations clear the way for more purges just like that.
President Trump has shifted U.S. military focus to the Indo-Pacific, with China as the primary concern. So how might the shakeup inside China's military impact Washington's approach?
I would say the Chinese Communist Party is more dangerous to the outside world than it ever has been, ever. And the reason is this. Even with the economy suffering, that does not affect the budget of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. Even with the power struggles taking place, even with Xi Jinping losing some power, they might be even more likely to do something drastic. The Chinese Communist Party is the problem, not necessarily the leader.
More details on the purges could emerge during 2 upcoming gatherings in China. The CCP Politburo meeting expected next week and the Beidaihe meeting, a discrete session where veteran and current party leaders discuss key issues. The Beidaihe meeting is expected to take place next month. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Coming up, Ukraine is dealing with a week of protests, the first anti-government protest since the start of war. We have that and more when we come back.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. Food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month, and we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
South Korea's industry minister and top trade envoy are meeting Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington. South Korea's presidential office said today's meeting could move the two nations closer to a trade deal. The office reported that the three also met yesterday, reaffirming their commitment to reach an agreement on tariffs. Pressure on South Korea intensified this week after Japan reached a deal with the United States. Ukraine is dealing with a week of protests, the first anti-government protests since the start of the war. President Volodymyr Zelensky says he hears people's concerns, now introducing a new anti-corruption bill. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest on Ukraine, starting with the battlefield update.
Russian glide bombs hit a hospital in Kharkiv on Friday. Ukrainian officials say the attack left at least 14 wounded. It's the second straight day the city was struck with a powerful glide bomb. An employee at the hospital condemns the attack by Russian forces.
Tuberculosis patients are being treated here. There is nothing military here. Only a cemetery and a field are near the hospital. What are they targeting this area?
Also on Friday, the Russian Navy continues a major military drill using live artillery fire and missile launches. The exercises are being held across different parts of the globe, including the Pacific Ocean in Asia and the Baltic Sea in Europe. The drill is scheduled to last until Sunday. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, protests continue in different cities across the country. Earlier this week, President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a bill into law, taking away power from two important anti-corruption agencies. This came after officials from those two agencies were arrested over alleged Russian influence.
We think that our anti-corruption, NABU, SAP, or other government agencies are important for our independence and for our victory.
After days of protests, Zelensky on Thursday submitted draft legislation to restore the independence of those two anti-corruption agencies. Protesters say they hope the draft legislation will become law. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Coming up, the Supreme Court has paused a lower court order blocking voter discrimination lawsuits. What would be the real-world impact if individuals could not bring lawsuits on this issue? Legal analysis coming up.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
I didn't ask to lose my mother or to be abused at 5 years old. I didn't ask to be kicked out of my house with nowhere to go. I just can't. I'm so sorry. I didn't ask for any of this. But I did ask for help, and Covenant House was there. Thanks to their love and support, and to generous people like you, I got what I needed to take control of my life.
For the young people who didn't ask to be put in unthinkable situations, Covenant House is there providing safety, hope, and a brighter future. Call or go online now. For a gift of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night. 1 in 10 young adults will experience homelessness this year. Your gift can help reach them when they need it most.
I didn't ask for my parents and my family to disown me. I didn't ask to end up in a homeless shelter. The beauty of it all is that I found Covenant House.
The need is overwhelming, but your monthly support will make sure no young person is ever turned away. Call or go online right now to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month. With your monthly donation, you'll receive this soft, comforting blanket as a reminder of the warmth and safety your gift will provide a young person tonight.
Covenant House